Religion. Religion. What is religion? And what does it have to do with video games? And why is Vishnu and Thor in every game? Why do Catholics like Assassin's Creed so much? And how come...
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
The answers to these questions and more are coming to you today as we discover the roles of religion in video games. Religion has influenced humanity's substantive, cultural systems of behavior, morals, beliefs, and worldview for millennia. You've got prophets, sacred texts, and prophecies, thousands of years of symbolism and rituals, music, identity, social connection within communities, belief in a higher power. Religion has persisted, carrying its ideals and culture forward for millennia. Religion has continued to evolve and react to technology. The printing press came along, and suddenly we didn't have to write stuff on stone tablets anymore. And then computers showed up, and the possibilities became even more infinite. But we're talking about video games, so we gotta go way back. Back to the beginning. I'm of course talking about 1958, when William Higginbotham had the genius idea to play tennis at the Brookhaven National Laboratory. Indoors, and without running, without rackets, and without a net. Truly, a genius idea. And the other scientists agreed, Tennis for Two was the first video game. And suddenly, virtual universes exploded into being. There didn't seem to be anyone stopping video games rising as a safe way to explore virtual ideas and worlds in an alternate reality. That is, until the natural nemesis of video games rose up to meet them, moms. Now, originally, moms weren't entirely as you know them today. Instead of telling you to get off your League of Legends match for Dino Nuggies, these moms were a species called Christian moms. And they were especially worried during the 1990s about a very common occurrence of losing your child to occultism and Satanism. And the easiest gateway to channeling Satan was video games. Bloody video games. A type of panic set in. A satanic panic. And unfortunately, a new video game was an easy target, revolutionizing the industry and inventing a genre, and also corrupting the youth. It was a zoom-in first-person shooter with shotguns, demons, and blood. Lots of blood. And its name was Doom. Of course, it was designed by Sandy Peterson, who happened to be a Mormon, and who thought it had a great message about demons being the bad guys. Rational heads prevailed, and it was easily concluded that Doom was going to make little Timmy into a devil worshipper. So the mothers banded together and did what mothers do best. They influenced legislation. Something had to be done, and something was, in 1993. Video games, namely violent ones, were headed to the chopping block. The judges wanted to know, were video games corrupting the youth? Nintendo stepped forward and made the first move, by throwing the other game companies under the bus. They reasoned that no legislation should be passed on them, only their competitors. After all, Nintendo would never make any lewd, mature games that are about occultism. The judges were having none of it. Well, pretty quickly, Nintendo had to learn that they needed to join up with their competitors to survive. And thus, the ESRB was born, a self-governing body designed by the video game companies to legislate ratings for games and to save the children. Video games were free again, and able to legally explore difficult topics. Christian mothers were sated, but the bitter animosity remained. Religion in games takes two forms, explicit and implicit, though these two forms are not exclusionary of one another. First, let's define the explicit form. Explicit can be a reference to a religious or spiritual concept that is clear. In this sense, fictitious and real-world religions can be used. A good example of this is Sid Meier's fantastic game Civilization. In Civilization, you are usually a warmongering genocidal dictator, or you can play the boring route and win by not killing everyone else. The game technically allows you to play as a ruler who determines how religions form within your borders. The religion mechanic is actually fairly complex. Religion can determine a city's happiness, how other countries view you, and come with a variety of other benefits. And as the leader of a country, you can convert other cities within and without your country. These are all gameplay mechanics that reinforce the role of religion. The implicit form, on the other hand, can be as general as a tale of the hero's journey, or when the protagonist fulfills a prophecy. Games like this are games like Journey, a game where many people associated it with a sense of spiritualism. The creators worked very hard to create a character that anyone could project themselves onto. The character is genderless, and the game generally uses symbolism to reinforce its spiritual nature. A lot of designers initially might recognize that a lot of religions have settings to provide spiritual experiences, and it's easy to lean in on those. Fasting, for instance, creates an altered state of mind that a lot of religions use. Religious structures are designed to create awe, peace, and privacy. Seeing these places brings us into those mindsets even if we aren't particularly religious ourselves. Now that we know how to define religious games, the exciting part is that we get to look at all the different types of religious games. And man, let me tell you, I am so excited today to talk about religion in video games. All different types of religion. There's a bunch of them. Like, there's a lot of different ones that I can think of. Christian games seem to dominate the market of what I would call proselytizing games. It almost seems there's a unique phenomena when someone becomes a Christian game designer. They're immediately drawn to popular games as a way to proselytize because they're popular. You've got the classics like Dance Praise 2, the remix, and the Bible game. Essentially, the designers take the game and erase a bunch of the morally questionable bits and then replace them with references to the Bible and Jesus. And what you have after is, well, game clones. And Christian games aren't solely to blame, even if they have flooded the market. Islamic and Buddhist games seem to be stuck on the other side, in the educational sphere. The breadth of religious iconography and symbolism is deep and interesting. And religious games could do so much more with their own religious imagery. Which brings me to the next part. Video games are art. Video games use art to convey feelings and emotions. Video games also really suck at using religious art in a meaningful way. A lot of the games are skin deep. A lot of designers initially understand that places and practices can instill a type of emotion, but instead lean heavily on how a character looks. I imagine a lot of designers get together to brainstorm a new character, and the new intern, let's call her Janita, says, Zeus is pretty cool because he's a buff grandpa in a toga and he's got lightning. And Ben, who's worked there for 5 years, in an attempt to make the idea his, says, but every other company does Zeus, so let's do a buff old guy who shoots lightning and let's call him something different, like Keranos or something. Which is all fine and dandy, except Jonita is an intern and religious figures can be more than just character templates. Designers opt for cool character designs, then they regurgitate them over and over and over again. Which, I mean, people still play those characters and enjoy it because at least we know the lore. So when a game comes by and says, okay, listen up, playtime's over. Let me show you a big kid game. And then they go, BAM! Aesthetics and diegetic gameplay. How do you like that? And well, I like those games a lot. BioShock Infinite is one of those games. BioShock Infinite was revolutionary because an intern had the bright idea of instead of putting BioShock games in the water like the other BioShock games, you put it in the sky. Which is pretty neat because a few minutes in, we have no idea what's happening and get launched in a rocket. Suddenly, there's a bunch of people all waiting around this preacher guy and are expecting you to get dunked. And after you get baptized, you go through this canal and end up in a beautiful garden, which is like getting born again. And you're in this beautiful city, and then it's in the sky, and it's like heaven. And I'm like, okay, horror game, show me the monsters. Then they show us that humans are the monsters all along. This is called good game design. BioShock wasn't the first to pull it off. Assassin's Creed long used the aesthetic not only artistically, but through its narrative elements as well. You have a retelling of the biblical canon, explaining the origins of humanity's creation. Assassin's Creed plays with the what if of mythos, and video games in general can safely explore these topics within the realm of the magic circle. Assassin's Creed places us in a familiar setting and makes it unfamiliar, and even more mystical. And the best way to do that is through setting. The Notre Dame is a striking setting for Assassin's Creed. Designers from Ubisoft painstakingly did 3D renders of the entire structure because accuracy in design was essential. And after the Notre Dame burnt down, the template for construction was sourced from Ubisoft scans. While diegetic gameplay is awesome, the problem is that if it's not executed properly, it can lead to some controversies. The relationships between video games and religion, well, it's rocky. Doom wasn't the first or last religious controversy. No, we had criticisms for Smite using Hindu deities, but not Abrahamic deities because, quote, they are not that interesting in character design or gameplay, end quote. Other controversial games that were offensive to Hindus were Fallout 3, Hanuman, Boy Warrior, and Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. Christian controversies include Assassin's Creed Valhalla for their burning of churches and monasteries, and Hitman 2, Silent Assassin, had a level where you killed Sikhs in their holy sites, the same place where hundreds of real-life Sikhs were massacred in 1984. Some controversies are intended, however, to push the envelope. South Park's Fractured But Whole has a part where you can find Jesus in the church by playing a virtual hide-and-seek, and then call him later with a pair of machine guns to kill your enemies. Parody games exist to poke fun at the symbols and beliefs of religions. Some games choose to use humor, while others criticize religion. These games often employ parallelism. For instance, Dead Space uses its in-game religion, Unitology, as a criticism of Christianity, while Watch Dogs 2 has you expose the fake cuneiform tablets of a religion eerily similar to Scientology. In a study by the University of Missouri, the findings were that video games often emphasize the violent aspects of religion, even in those that don't intend to criticize religion. Game designers seem to want to create interesting story points by using religious imagery. I always get drawn to the idea of the famous fantasy author Ursula Le Guin's handbag carrier of fiction. Humanity is always more excited by stories with violence and, quote, the pointy things of the world, end quote. Le Guin argues that it's really hard to make an engaging story about the more mundane things. Sometimes, in an attempt to escape, we forget that really meaningful moments can be found in religion, like losing or gaining faith. Video games tend to view religion as a monolithic organization that motivates characters for or against them. What is video games' relationship with religion in the future? Well, games have begun to overcome the stigma as simply being viewed as entertainment or escapism. Rather, they've begun to mold themselves into something greater, a way to tune into something more meaningful. And you can see a lot of religious game makers realize that they need to tune into that. There are some exciting games ongoing with Buddhism and Christianity. Games are unique because they carry the suggestions of the designers. They've created their own myths, stories, and symbols that have affected society. And most importantly, games give players choice. This means that Commander Shepard can be atheist, or in Civ, you can choose your population's religion. While a designer makes games and can put their thoughts into it, a player makes it happen by playing it. Players can give meaning to their experiences. And I have faith that designers will incorporate more than just the surface level religious symbolism that they have been so far. The next time you play, take time to explore what the designers are telling you about any particular religious element. Then recognize what choices you're afforded. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed thinking a little bit more about video games and religion. Till next time, have a blessed day.